Hello, my name is Victoria Cruz, and welcome to Black Art Matters by Broadway Dallas. Today we are celebrating Latinx Heritage Month. Today we are going to have an amazing discussion about Afro-Latina women and others represented in the DFW area. Again, my name is Victoria Cruz, and I am she, her. I recognize myself as Puerto Rican, Panamanian, and African American, and I'll go ahead and let everybody else introduce themselves.
My name is Tamika Sanders. I identify as Afro-Latina. I'm Puerto Rican and Black, and my pronouns are she, her, la, ella.
Hi, I'm Dr. Marta Torres. I am Puerto Rican and Mexican. I identify as Afro-Latina, and happy to be here with y'all.
Hi, I am Cynthia Diggs, Cynthia Maria Diggs, and I am from Colón, Panama, and I identify as she, her, and also as Afro-Latina, and I'm so glad to be here.
I am Karla Michelle Done, and I identify as Afro-Latina, and I am Black and Taína, and I'm happy to be here with all these beautiful women.
Wow, yeah, that's an overall statement for me as well. I'm extremely honored to be sitting amongst you beautiful women, and I say let's jump right in. We have a lot we could be talking about right now. Absolutely. So I'd love to start with just like what you do in the Dallas area as an artist right now.
Mm-hmm. So my full-time job is nonprofit. I also work in theater, so I've done some musicals, and I most recently was Millie in The Curse of the Puerto Ricans at the Bishop Arts Theater Center.
Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, defining what I do gets trickier as every year passes. I currently work in a nonprofit as well. I'm predominantly art education has been my background in education. I also do teaching artist trainings for other artists. I am also in the theater world, just getting back into kind of the swing of things after 6 years of being here and 3 years of finally completing my doctorate's degree. I just directed Curse of the Puerto Ricans, where Tamika was starring.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I'm excited to pursue new ventures. I'm currently diving deep into some more scripts, and some more work is coming up, so I'm really excited for that. And that's what I do. So theater, nonprofit, all around educator, I would say it's my passion, my background.
Awesome.
I love that.
Well, I had the opportunity to go back to school after my late husband passed away. In 2014, I got my bachelor's degree. So I do a little bit of everything, some freelance costume designing, freelance sewing, and I'm currently in the process of building a company that helps people organize their life and create the lifestyle that you want. So, look for that soon. And I just love people and helping people grow and figure out what they want to do as well. So that's some of what I do.
Cool. Awesome.
I'm also in a nonprofit organization. I'm a teaching artist for Big Thought, Thriving Minds After School.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'm teaching my little ones, movement, acting, and I also freelance in acting and modeling and a little bit of photography.
Cool.
Amazing.
I am a teaching artist locally. I also teach at SMU for non-majors, and I'm currently acting professionally in the Dallas area. Right now I'm at the Park at Samuel Graham. We're doing an all-female version of Hamlet. So,
wow.
Amazing.
Yeah, and the amazing Cruz is directing, and it's going to be sensational. Great. Awesome. So speaking of theater, why we're all here, right? What was your first experience with theater? What made you say, I want to do that, or I want to be somewhere near that, or how do you see yourself, or what was that experience?
So before we even started this, we were talking about Once on This Island. I feel like every little Afro-Latina actress was in Once on This Island. So I was on Once on This Island playing the little girl before she grew up. I was 7, so I didn't really know how to read because I was really dyslexic when I was young. But once I got casted for that, I already knew this was about like Haitians and Frenchmen and Dominicans and Puerto Ricans. So I was like, you know what? This is a role that's literally me, and I want to keep going with that. And I just took acting to another level. So now it's kind of hard in Dallas trying to find acting roles. It's more like commercials and small short films, but ese es a nivel mío.
So for me, my whole family in Puerto Rico was involved in theater in one way or the other. I mean, cousins, my older cousins on my dad's side. So I remember going to like theater shows when I was itty bitty, 8, 9, 10. Mm-hmm. And then by the time I was 13, I started taking classes and acting. I'm trained as an actor first, and that's like one of my passions, and I think it helps in my directing, the way I approach the work. But yeah, I've been involved in theater since I was like 13 in Puerto Rico, and it was an interesting experience because even though I was in Puerto Rico, and when we talk about race and ethnicity in Puerto Rico, you're in a bubble, right? It's like a little silo because you're just used to seeing people who look like you or don't, but they're still related to you. Like I have blonde and blue-eyed cousins, and then there's me, and then there's darker than me. So it's always been kind of a bubble, but still within the theater world, it was difficult to get any roles other than the stereotypical role we're cast in as. I was 5'8" by the time I was 16, so by the time I was 10 I was 5'2". I've always been big, tall, wide, thick, if you will. So it was always cast in very specific roles, even in Puerto Rico. So that wasn't like very different than being here in the States, I feel, on the mainland, if you will. So theater has been in my life since the age of 13, and I did it in college professionally, ran a small theater company up until the time I moved here in 2016.
Wow. So. I can recall, of course, those plays in school that you're in, right? But when I was going to go to Langston University and did with my late husband, and my major was accounting and my minor was theater. So opposite, but I was like, I know I want to make bank, right? But I want to do something that I love and enjoy being around and doing. So as time progressed, I didn't really pursue acting as much. Now my children, they ended up doing that, and that has like pulled me back into this theater world that I just love, being in support of and watching you all just shine so bright on stage and hearing stories, and that's more or less how I kind of found myself weaving back into the thread of this world. So
okay,
that's so interesting. We have all these different stories, right? and I think it's so great that we have one story that's like, this was me, this was my role. Right. It was written for me. I fell into place. I said the lines. They were my words. And then we have something where it's like, as time went on, from 13 until now, I feel like I haven't seen myself as I see myself, but as they see myself. Can you speak more to, I guess, being seen on stage and like what it is to be Latina on stage versus being Latina in reality?
Gosh, where to start with that? So it's always been like, by the time I was 16 and 17, that's when I started to really look around and be like, so if we are this, I hate using the word diverse, because what is diversity? But, if we're this diverse and multicultural, even within Puerto Rico, why aren't there more plays? Why aren't there more stories that are showing who we are authentically as well? And this questions I started popping up when I was 16, 17, trying to break, the beauty cultural norms. Like, I used to straighten my hair out every week and doobie it up because you need to keep it, so it'll last. My hair was fried by the time I was 20. Right. And I did the big chop. But, you used to, because you're trying to fit a mold, and then you look around and you look in the theater world and you really don't see yourself, but for very brief instances, very specific roles or very specific plays. So that's really when it started to like dawn on me, like, is there room for me in this space that I love? Because I love theater. I loved it then. I love it now. But I really couldn't see myself in the stories I was being a part of. A lot of musicals, a lot of like traditional classical plays, but where did I fit in, and where do people like me see themselves?
Do you all feel that similar? Do you feel similarly?
Well, you know,
you just got done with Curse of Puerto Ricans. Like,
yeah.
how
So
was that?
initially, just to give a little background, I didn't start acting until I've always been acting up, but I've always been really dramatic. It was like, why aren't you doing something with this? You know. So I've done things here and there, little projects here and there at church and like, you know, in the community for my friends and who were like playwrights or who were participating in maybe film contests or whatever. So I've done some of that. But when I moved to Dallas, I went to UCD and I took a couple of acting courses then. And I knew that I wanted to do some more, but I just didn't know where to navigate, you know, how to navigate or where to start. And so it was told to me pretty frankly that Dallas was not the place for me to pursue an acting career. It was told to me by the professor, like, Dallas is not the place to pursue an acting career for a couple reasons. One, this isn't the scene for it. You're from New York, I'm from the Bronx, so it's like, go back home. But also, there wasn't a lot of space. There weren't stories being told about people who looked like me. And I mean, you could forget talking about Afro-Latinidad. Like, when I say people who look like me, I meant like maybe light-skinned black girls. Like, there weren't that many stories. There, you know. But when it was like out there that I'm like, I'm Puerto Rican and black, and I'm looking for roles where I'm not just expected to speak Mexican Spanish, or sound like someone who's Mexican, or who speaks very proper Spanish, if that's what you want to call it. So it was always very difficult to find myself in the productions that I would see. How I started was with Public Works Dallas, which is an amazing nonprofit out of Dallas Theater Center. And what they were doing was they were going to different community agencies and teaching acting workshops with the professional actors leading these workshops. And so that was kind of my in. That's how I started. And then they were very explicit about wanting to be inclusive of everybody, and so the shows were Shakespeare, but they were written where there was some Spanish in it, and you know, there was like some, you know, maybe folklorico dance, or like, you know, still not my thing, but we're getting somewhere, because you know, there are black people being seen and there are Latinos being, you know, involved in Shakespeare, and this is unheard of. And so that was kind of how I saw myself the first time. But it wasn't until Curse of the Puerto Ricans I was like, yo, this is it. Holy shit. This is somebody who looks like me. She's from where I'm from. Like, as far as I was concerned, she looked like me. She's from where I was from in New York. She spoke, you know, Spanglish. She's Puerto Rican. She's a New Yorican. Like, this is home. This is for me. And then the fact that there was a director who was also Puerto Rican, and the playwright was very familiar with Puerto Rican culture, and like the whole thing was this was my niche. Like, this was where I needed to like act the fuck up. Right. And I feel like I did.
Oh, she did. She did. She really did.
Thank you, Marta. Amazing director, amazing leadership.
Wow.
Thank you.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Let me know if y'all have auditions.
Yeah, seriously. Seriously, I heard about that play coming on, and Mize, I worked with Mize this summer, and I was just like, wow, what a blessing to not have to reach so far to attain a character, to really have this character in your back pocket, which is kind of a privilege and a luxury that our counterparts, our fellow actors, don't realize they have. That I can literally wake up and roll out of the bed and be this person that I have to walk on stage and be, versus battling what we think is a whitewash of something or a black wash of something. So that's interesting to hear that, and that's a blessing. Thank you.
For sure.
Thank you. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Let's see. So, you know, that makes me actually think of this question. It's funny because I have a story. In grad school, I was finally asked the question, like, how do you identify culturally? And I was like, well, my daddy's Puerto Rican and my mama black. You know, that's what I had. And I was like, oh, this new thing called Afro-Latina. What is that?
Yeah.
What is that? And realizing that my father is Afro-Latina and be like, oh, whoa, mind blown. Okay, now I'm Afro-Latina.
Yeah.
But then I was like, but wait, I'm black too. how do you define that? And so I'm Black and I'm Afro-Latina, which is something that you have to say. So what does it mean to you to be
that is layered
Afro-Latina? Yes.
So I'm just gonna let me just go ahead and just
dive in.
You know, I'm Puerto Rican and Black. My dad's Black. My mom's Puerto Rican. My mom's white passing. So me identifying as Afro-Latina finally gave me something that I could say without having to explain mom's Puerto Rican, dad's Black, you know, I'm half Puerto Rican, half Black. It's so long, it's so much, you know, and I'm proud of it, but having one term that was like a category, was a classification, was an identity, like to be able to own that meant a lot to me. And then even that had been challenged because it was like, well, that's not what Afro-Latina means. It doesn't mean that, you know, one of your parents is Black. Or it doesn't mean that you're from the Caribbean. It means that you're either from Central America, where, you know, there are Black people who were colonized and mixed with the indigenous and the Hispanic and the Spanish. It was very confusing, and I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but hell no. Like, I'm Afro-Latina. Like, that's just the way that I saw it. So I really feel, you know, there can be layers to that definition. For me, that's how I identify, because it just in one word grouped what I am, and it's very much what I feel like and how I present and how I show up and how I speak and what I do, and whether I'm eating pernil or collard greens or both, you know, it's like it's all of those things. So
Yeah, absolutely.
No, for me, and this is very much my bachelor's in history, so I'm a researcher at heart. I'm a nerd, happy one, and like. Again, the definition of Afro-Latina is, or Afro-Latino, Afro-Latine, Afro-Latinx, however we want to, you know, how we identify ourselves. It's unclear. But when you define race, when you define ethnicity, these are social constructs as well, right?
Yeah.
These are things that have been defined by a particular group of people to define others, who they consider other, right? So I'm going to take the term, I'm going to adopt being Afro-Latina, and it's going to be how I use it, how I identify, and I'm going to make it my own. Both my parents are white passing, both. Both my siblings are white passing. But in Puerto Rico, we have a saying, ¿Y tu abuela dónde está? Where's your grandma, right?
it's in there somewhere.
It's in there somewhere. And in my case, it's in both sides. On my great-grandparents' sides, my great-great-grandmother was Black and indigenous, so Africana y Taína. And on my mom's side, my abuela's from Veracruz. And Veracruz was one of the first posts that the Spaniards put into the New World, as they call it, in Mexico in 1534. So this is one of the first ports where slaves were brought into what is now the United States and Latin America. So it's from that side too. And all those genes showed up in me. Yeah. And I am the brown child that my parents had. And I am the only one with this textured hair. So it was really, I know I belong to my people and my folks, but it was almost like, how do I define myself? And how do I present to others, right? And this is a conversation I've had with my mom in 2020, when everything was happening, you know, in our country in that time. My mom was like, I don't want you going to, you know, to protest or anything. And I'm like, okay. Well, she knows her kid, first of all. Yeah. But secondly, and then she said something that really struck out to me. She's like, I don't want you to be confused. And I'm like, confused as what? And she's like, I don't want people to confuse you for a Black woman. And like, I took a pause in that conversation, and I'm like, Mommy, how I look out into the world is more often than not, 9 times out of 10, as a Black woman. People don't see white. People don't see Latina. They see my features and they think Black, and maybe they think Black mixed. Right. But the first thing that comes to mind is Black. And I'm like, and I know I'm your kid, and at home I'm just Marta. But out in the world, I carry myself in the way people see me. I can't put this in a drawer or walk around with a explanation on my chest. I'm half Puerto Rican and Mexican, and I look this way because of, you know, that's too much.
But also, it's like, you're going to wear that and what? Please don't shoot?
Please don't shoot. Right. So, like, you know, I am who I am. I present who I present as. I wear my ancestry proud in my features and in my face and in my hair. So I took Afro-Latina because that's what people see when they look at me. Afro, Black, that's the root. Yeah. So that's what that means to me, and that's why I adopted that phrase for myself.
Yeah. I grew up in Brooklyn, Ocean Parkway, Flatbush. So being there, melting pot.
Yeah.
Haitian, Jamaican, Trinidadian, Dominican, like every patacones, arroz con pollo, like all of the things are in New York. So then in '85, coming here,
Culture shock.
I was like, I don't want to move to Texas. No. I don't want to be around tumbleweeds and horses. Like, I just was like, not here for it. Yes. I was not. I miss talking like, you know. Yes. So at any rate, being here is so different because when you tell people, oh, I was born in Panama. Oh, you were Black Mexican. Ooh. You know, immediately it's that, and I'm like, no. For the longest time, that's why I say this is a renaissance for me. For the longest time, I did not feel like I had a voice. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I feel you. I felt it when you said it.
Yeah. And now I do. Just being here at this table with you ladies. It's almost like I was hiding. I remember riding dirty for a while with my driver's license because I was trying to renew my passport and my, like, all the things you have to go through with your green card and all these different things people don't know or they take for granted what it's like to be born on this soil. They don't understand. And to have the opportunities that we have, it's a blessing. And so now my daughter, she's like, Mom, how come I don't know Spanish? Well, it makes me think when I was growing up how the system made my mom make me forget my Spanish. So I understand it more, right? And so English, so that she will not speak with an accent, so she won't get left behind in her grade. You know, it was all of those things that as you get older, you don't realize how that actually impacts. It's a filter in which you make life choices through.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And instead of, it's like you have this bright light and people see it, but sometimes you don't see it yourself. And so now I feel like this light in us is here to shine and shine brighter and give other people permission to let their light shine. But, you know, I'm proud to say I'm Afro-Latina. Like, to be able to say that, and still I am admittedly discovering what that actually means for me.
Yeah.
So
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It's so sentimental. I forgot the question.
That's amazing. I got
trying to hold the tears
back. I was like, yes. What does it mean to you to be Afro-Latina?
Well,
And you had a move as well, a culture shock, if you will. Yeah.
Well, I was born in Texas, raised in Texas. No playa, no Caribbeans, no nothing. And I like look back and I'm so thankful for how many times I've been grounded because not being home really does erase like your Spanish because we try so hard to be American. It's like I would go to school, like me and my sister would go to all the same schools. So she's 33 now, I'm 25. So my teachers would be like, oh, you're that little Dominican girl, you're Jennifer's sister, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, but what does that really mean? Because my class would be like, well, you speak Spanish, you must be Mexican. And I'm like, well, I'm not Mexican. So I really didn't know I was Dominican until like third grade. So, and I would bring like plátanos to school, arroz habichuela, and they're like, what's that? I'm like, this is what I eat every day.
Ooh, what do you mean?
So like for a minute, it was just like, well, you're not Black because you're not African American. It's like that's the most common misconception is when people say that you're black, they're just thinking about African or African American, and it's just like there's black people all over the world that didn't derive from slavery, and it's like it's just like a common misconception that most of the slavery happened here in America, because they call it the North Americas, like including the Caribbean, but it just lasted longer here. So that's why people are like, well, you're not fully black, or you're not like 100% black, and it's just like, well, does that really matter? I mean, we're really in the same community here. So I would have that problem too. My mom, she's like taína, looking like trigueñita, like brown. So she is kind of like white passing too. And my dad's side of the family is like all light skin and dark skins. And it's just like, I really got to pull my black card out every time. And it's like things about like hair. It's like my hair is super, super curly. It's almost like 4C hair. And then it's like, okay, but we have our culture too. So it's like, should I get the Dominican blonde or should I keep it natural? I don't really know what to do.
If we go into hair.
Yeah. So it's like, it's really hard to keep the culture here, at least in southern states. Because in New York, it's like, of course, the melting pot, Florida, Virginia, the DMV area, period. And it's just hard because it's like, people just think black is just one thing, one place. It's just not that. Yeah. So that's what I struggle with here with Latino friends. It's like, okay, you're listening to reggaeton, but do you know where it's coming from? Because it didn't come from Mexico.
Yeah.
And it's like they get all the recognition. It's like, oh, the music's popping and blah, blah, blah. Well, but really, that's our music. But we love to share, right? Any Latino music. Like, we know a lot of Selena music. Like, I love Selena. Like, that's what I used to cry when I'm acting. Like, her music. So, yeah, it's just like growing up not around Caribbeans other than your family was hard for me.
Yeah. I think for me, growing up in the deep South, like I'm from Alabama.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready. You should have prepped
We getting better, y'all. Growing up in Alabama, I was mixed. I wasn't Latin anything. I was mixed. Oh, you're light skinned, you got good hair, okay, you're mixed, right? So it wasn't until I got to Texas, really, where they were like, where I felt a bit like categorized, more specifically, but still categorized, into a new slot, which is, oh, you're Latin, are you legal? Like, your last name is Cruz, I don't really have time to show you this apartment, and I was just like shook. I was like, oh, y'all discriminating for real in Texas, but it's on a different level. So I say everybody has their own faults, and I think what I heard a large sum of is categorization and like separatism.
Totally.
Erasure, absolutely, and acclimating to survive, and it also translates into how we're artists and how we move through the world of art. And so I would love to hear like how it's going, like what does it feel like to now be owning this new thing, right? To say we're gonna do Curse of Puerto Ricans now because I have agency and I can do that, versus like, oh, now we have to do She Loves Me, or now we're doing Midsummer Night's Dream, where now I'm fitting back into this box. How do you show yourself in spaces where you are not usually seen, and still show up fully as yourself?
So I think, I know it's shifting. It's shifting in a way that like we're taking up space now, and there's no way in hell I'm going back to not taking up space authentically and genuinely. And in spaces like Bishop's Art Theater Center, like Miss Teresa, we had a conversation how, multiculturalism has to be backed up, right? And I think that's something that all of our communities struggle with, especially in Latino community. Like, you can be black and Panamanian, black and Mexican, black and Puerto Rican, but that sense of our ancestry in that sense of who we be as people, we try to run away from. And it's not something that I don't think we do on purpose. It's just something that we've been systemically taught to do.
Yeah.
Right? We want to go as far away from our blackness as possible because that's what we conditioned to do.
Even subconsciously.
Because we internalize that. We internalize it and we take it and we pass it on like a curse.
Yes, I was going to say, we're born with it. It's passed down from generation to generation.
And now, particularly in my work, there's no way I'm going to shift back and tone down what I bring and who I bring. Because the only reason I ended up directing Curse of the Puerto Ricans, this is a really interesting story, it's because I went to a talk back for one of the plays at Bishop Arts, and it was the How to Be plays for racial justice. And I mentioned, like I do now almost anywhere that I go, that I grew up in Calle, Puerto Rico. That I am from Puerto Rico. I'm half Mexican, I'm half Puerto Rican, but I grew up in La Isla del Encanto. And I say that wherever I go, and that's how it happened. Like Teresa heard, and she's like, wait, I've been looking for a Puerto Rican director for this play. Because we want it to be authentic, we want it to be genuine. And Curse of the Puerto Ricans have been on standby for 2 years because it was casted back in 2020. Yes. Right? So it manifested the universe. And I had been asking the universe, I'm like, I'm ready to get back into this. What's the project that's going to take me back into the world of theater and art in the way that I love? Because I've been around still teaching artists and art, but not in the way I wanted to. Yeah. And this just happened. Mm-hmm. So me being authentically and genuinely myself brought that to be. Mm-hmm. And now that I've stepped into that and into that space, it's not that I'm pigeonholing myself there, it's I'm holding myself accountable to continue to represent who I am and people who look like me or may feel like me in those spaces as well. So the projects that I want to do going forward are projects that do represent that and that, Afro-Latinidad, that diversity, that flavor that only we bring into these spaces. And that's how I want to continue to do my work going forward, no matter what I do. And that's with stories like Curse of the Puerto Ricans, with dramas, with love stories, all of it, because we haven't been allowed to tell our stories through our own lens authentically, right? And we have stories of all types to tell. And that's what I want to do going forward, like honoring that space in that way with my art, with what I want to bring to life on stage.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, was it an emotional experience? Like how was that? How was that gift?
The entire thing was emotional from the audition to closing. And like Marta said, we auditioned in 2020. At the time, the director that casted me basically told me, if you're doing too much, I will tell you. I'd rather you do more and I'll ask you to dial it down than for you to not give it everything, for you to hold back. And I had been so accustomed to holding back a little bit. You don't, because you don't want to be the aggressor. You don't want to come in and you don't want to be doing too much and trying to show everybody out, or like, you're too loud. And, me already being from New York, that's a thing. Me being half black, that's a thing. This is a show that's about, the Puerto Ricans, but I don't know if they understand what Puerto Ricans are, because she's the person who casted me. She's very aware, but she could have easily been someone else who was not. And so that felt like a gift. It was on my birthday. And it definitely felt like a gift to be casted or to audition, called back that same day. And just when I read the like the synopsis of what the play was, but also who the character was, I'm like, this is me through and through. And I need this. It was like, I was like pretty desperate for this role, because it was like, this is finally something that's coming to Dallas is doing this. What? I'm seeing our flag. What? This doesn't happen, And so then the pandemic hit, and for 2 years we didn't know if it was going to happen, and it was on the chopping block. It was, they didn't have a director at the time. It was like, we might not do it. But the actors, we kept emailing, like, we need this. And not all of us in the show are Puerto Rican, but we all wanted it. And that, and I say that and we're talking about Puerto Ricans, but what we really, and I can speak for myself, but I know Marta a little bit, so I feel like what we're saying is that we're finally creating a space. There's finally more, there's finally some attention. They're finally looking at people who are not just Mexican, right? Me encantan los mexicanos. Love Mexicans. I love Mexican food. I like people from Durango. I like people from Guanajuato, wherever, right? But it's not the same as Ponce, bro. It's not the same as Bayamon, and it's not, you know, it's different. It's not, and it's not, you know, it's not, and even Puerto Rican culture can identify closely with Panamanian culture and Dominican culture, right? So it's not the same as Santo Domingo, you know, and Bani, you know, where they eat rice and beans and they eat them together, you know, you know what I'm saying, and it's just a whole nother word for the word beans in Spanish, you know? Right. So it did feel like a gift. It still feels like a gift that it even happened, that there was so much support from the community, from the Puerto Rican community, that there was so much visibility for people. You know, our last show, someone was hella emotional, and it was so difficult for us to not cry right along with her during the talk back when she was sharing how this story was, it just really resonated with her and her children. And she drove an hour from where she was to see this show. And then I heard stories of people who had seen the show multiple times. And then I ran into, you know, since then I've run into other artists, other directors, other people who work in theater who are like, we're bringing this show here, you know, we want to talk about, I mean, you know, I can't give too much information because I don't know a whole lot, but, and I don't have the rights to speak so much about some things, but there are projects that are coming to Dallas that are in Geechee. Wow. Like, there are things that are coming to Dallas that Dallas has never seen before. And you know what? We're not the ones that need to prepare ourselves anymore. Yes. They do. Because we finally decided, we're not going to be quiet about this. That whole calladita más bonita type shit, we're not doing that anymore. We real cute and loud.
Yes. You know, you said you have children who are diving into the arts. Is that exciting for you? That, like,
absolutely. So my daughter, I'm so proud. She is going to be a part of DTC. This is something that she's been wanting since high school and has prayed for. And it's so crazy because she, you know, the pandemic for the theater community was so
ravaging,
hard, so hard. She went into a place that was like, it's heartbreaking because she couldn't create and express and, you know, be on that platform to shine. And so I see a rebuilding of the soul during this time. And so she, you know, a lot of self-talk, a lot of in the mirror, girl, you know what you bring. Like a lot of her affirmation. I'm like, that's that Spanish side coming out, you know? A lot of her speaking to herself and saying, enough. The world needs to see what we bring. Dallas needs to see what we bring in this community, in this space, with these faces, with these bodies, with these voices. The time is now. So I'm so proud. And my son is dabbling and starting to go into writing. So he wants to write and create. And it's just incredible to see them starting to maneuver through this river of theater. I'm proud. I'm proud. And I'm like, okay, y'all hook me up with these costume gigs so you know, I can let everyone look amazing. So I'm just, to answer your question, I'm proud. And it keeps me youthful. I'm like, ooh, what can I learn? Well, really? Like, to be honest, I was asking my daughter, okay, what does that mean? With the script, you know, all the questions. I'm like, okay, I'm not sure what. She's like, Mom, did you not look over it before you? I was like, no, I didn't. Just let me know what it is, okay? But it's okay. I'm here to learn and figure it out and share it with my generation because they need to get woke about matters such as this. So,
absolutely.
Yes,
I think that's amazing. You know, speaking of us being seen, I'd love to dabble in like how we're seen. I mean, you've got a great play that's written, Curse of Puerto Ricans, yes, but then we have plays, and I'm just going to mention it, like In the Heights. Okay, that's one
You're in my head.
Oh my goodness.
You're in my head.
Such a letdown.
But I know. But like,
It's a little something, though.
It makes me curious, though, as to like
Lin-Manuel.
The potential.
the pedestal
Yes.
Latina versus
Right.
the Latinas that exist
Yeah.
Right.
in reality, with bodies fed by beans and rice and bodies fed by plantains and things like
Yes.
that. Like, how do you think we can take a next step to actually like really opening up the spectrum of Latinas? And really, not only skin tone, but sizes, heights, hair textures, right? Dominican, like braids, blowouts, right? Natural. What do you guys have to say? Like, what do you wish for that? How is it frustrating to you, maybe?
One of my proudest moments in Curse of the Puerto Ricans was that everyone on that stage, except the mice, because they have beautiful blue hair, and it couldn't work, and I hated it because I love their hair texture. Anywho, but one of my like proudest moments was seeing this cast up there with their natural hair, seeing how they looked like a Caribbean family, like a Puerto Rican family, because we look like that, and just pushing forward and creating more spaces for that type of authenticity. Lin-Manuel Miranda can write a tune. He can. He can write a good play. Yes. But there has to be room for other voices to be heard. We run the risk of having just one voice be present when there has to be more. There has to be more room for more creatives, for more stories, for more inclusive bodies to be seen on stage and be like, yeah, that's, that's how people look like and how people present themselves, and that should be part of the norm. It shouldn't be something that you're like, oh, I can see myself once in a while. It's more like I want to see myself always.
Right. Yeah.
So just creating more spaces for those creative voices to be heard and to be seen, and not silencing ourselves anymore. Because like I said, Lin-Manuel Miranda, right, he can write a tune, and I have thoughts about him, and like I think all of Puerto Rico has thoughts about Lin-Manuel Miranda. But porque se hace a lo suyo, right? Se hace a lo suyo, but we run the risk of being represented by a singular voice in a singular space, and that's when we grow stagnant and we don't grow, and we go through erasure all over again.
I'd love to hear your thoughts as someone with this beautiful skin.
Yes, thank you.
How does that go?
So we come in all shapes and sizes, and it's funny. That is a cry. No matter what your ethnicity, race, like everyone's like, look, my body is my body. This is who I am. This is how I'm built. Specifically for us, having this new platform to create more shows, I'm thinking not just theater, Netflix, like all these other platforms, we need to be seen, right? So in the few costume productions that I've done, it is always interesting when I always wanted to create a safe space for my full figure gorgeous beauties, right? Because everyone wants to look beautiful on set, no matter your role, big or small, right? So there's a certain approach you take. You make everyone feel like a star when they're coming to you to be sized and fitted, and I got the term the costume lady. The costume lady has my costume, but no matter what they were going to wear, it was my job to make sure that they felt beautiful, no matter what they were wearing, no matter what their role was. And I feel like that not only goes with the show itself, but it goes with the community surrounding the show. Like the message has to be, hey, we're all playing a part here, we're all playing a role here. That matters. It's just continuing to reiterate the message of, you matter, your body matters, your mind matters, all of those things. Absolutely. I think that's a place to kind of start, is with that one-on-one interaction on set. and knowing that role for me, to be able to just impart a little bit of letting people know their beauty in that moment, I found to be helpful. And I hope lingered. So, yeah.
Also, please take us out of the kitchen or of the sassy best friend roles. Please, please.
Yes.
Like, I really want to see a lead who is thicker, darker skinned, textured hair. Like, we can do that.
And maybe
FYI.
Yeah, maybe she's not just voluptuous. Like, you know, maybe she's actually a gordita. Like,
Gordita.
Una gordita con una panza with a boyfriend. I mean, hello.
Because we have those.
Yeah.
Right.
Verdad.
You know?
And they always, like, sometimes they be trying to play like gordita just to play the mom or like the aunt or something.
And
Like, come on now.
There have been many times when I've
The
looked
main
on stage and I'm
character.
like, she looks younger than me, and why is she playing a mom or an aunt or whatever? Because of her size.
So true.
You know? So, I mean, I auditioned for a role and thought that I could get it just because of my size. Because the woman's supposed to be like 50 years old. So I'm like, you know what?
I've done the same thing. I've auditioned for older roles because of the way my body presents. Like, I am thicker than some. But I do the same thing. I'm like, 50-something, I could play that because that's what I'm used to being casted in because of my size. So it's always like a...
Yep.
You know, we have novios and novias and
Right?
novias.
It
Like,
happens. Like, believe it or not.
Believe it or not,
some people
we're
think we're
good.
sexy.
Yeah.
Like,
Lots
you
of
know.
people.
But some people think we're sexy.
Seriously.
but honestly, like, take us out of, even in telenovelas in Latin America,
my
take us out of the kitchen or out of being the sassy best friend. We are some of the most amazing actors I've ever known are, you know, outside of what the status quo is. So let us take up space.
Like on my block.
Exactly.
Yeah.
On my
I
block.
love her. But again, you know, sassy best friend.
Yeah.
But again, it's like even Univision, we're not in la novela, we're on the commercials. Or like if it's a Rosa de Guadalupe episode, it's about racism, not actually something they would, you know, do with a regular.
But even
like,
in Univision, we're not the
Latino.
newscaster, right?
One
we're
black
also not the story.
newscaster.
We're not the story.
They stopped covering George Floyd. They didn't want to cover George Floyd. People that, and Jorge Ramos has specific comments
Yeah.
about why Univision was not covering those things. And I grew up watching him and listening to him as a kid.
Yeah.
And what that felt like was,
We just don't
that's
care.
their shit. Like, you know, like,
Yeah.
that ain't
Don't
got to do with
mess
us.
the messy stuff.
Yeah, and like we have, you know, we're the good ones. You know what I mean? Like, they like us. If we do too much, we may be disruptive. If we
Yeah.
disrupt too much, we could lose.
Yeah, and that's again separating because we're
And
really
it's-
all fighting the same fight.
And
We
it's
just don't realize
same.
it.
definitely heartbreaking. Like, it's very heartbreaking because it's like, you know, to be at protests or demonstrations and to see people say, tu pelea es mi pelea, is like they have to say it. When really it's like, it should be default.
Exacto.
It should be default that my fight is your fight.
Right.
You brown too.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
you brown and you're not the black person who's at the bottom of the totem pole, but you really close, bro.
Right.
Like, you're real close.
As soon as all the black people are gone,
Yes.
the next list
There you
up,
go.
and the next list up, and the next list up.
I think, you know, to go back to something that you asked is like, how do we, like, I don't remember exactly how you asked it, but like, how do we continue to, like, I guess maybe to continue that momentum. And I think we just oversaturate it, bro. Like, I think we
Yeah,
just
it's just
oversaturate those places. That's it.
constant
Like,
erasure.
people who look like all of us show up for the same role and audition for it, you know?
Yeah.
And they have no choice but to say, we're gonna have to cast a fucking Afro-Latina. Like, we're gonna have to, like, because those are the ones who showed up and they got it.
But also,
you
they
know?
never know what they want.
No, they
They
don't.
never know what they want until you get there, and then like, I never thought about that.
And it's important to
Yeah.
be vocal about your experiences, you know? Like, it was hard for me to say to Marta the day after our costume fitting. I did not want to be,
I
a
was so
couple of
mad.
things happened, right? I didn't, again, want to be an aggressor. I didn't want to be complaining. I didn't want to have, like, a problem or an attitude or be disruptive. Or all of those things played in my mind before I said anything to you. About the comment that was made to me about costume. And it was like, so, and the person comes over to me with their laptop. They only had 3 articles of clothing for me. I'm a plus size woman. They asked for my sizes. I gave them my size in pants. I gave them my shirt size. I gave them everything, right? I was specific. If you're going to do a 9, do a 9. I don't have to have a 9 wide or whatever, right? Anyway, the person comes back, 1 pair of pants in a size 16, 2 shirts, 1 in a 4X and 1 in a, I guess it was a 2X.
Not cute.
And I guess she was just like, we're just gonna figure out something, right? They weren't even. She hyped me up. Martha hyped me up because she told me she set me up because she was like, I have a whole color scale in mind for this character.
Because I did. It was shared.
And she's gonna be colorful and she's gonna be like this, right? And so I'm ready to embody this character. And I get there, and there are three articles of clothing for me. None of them worked, but I'm being a good sport. I tried them on anyway. I knew looking at them that they weren't gonna work for me. That wasn't. It didn't end there. I get the laptop conversation. So when I think of a Latina in New York, I think of AOC. And I could have cried on the spot, but I didn't. Because what kept me from crying was that I was angry. And what kept me from like spazzing is that this is a professional environment. She doesn't know any better. And that's what we always tell ourselves. They don't know any better. And I'm like, how are you the only person in this whole thing? Like, I was good up until today. How are you the only person in this whole thing that reminded me that you don't see me? That I'm not really seen, or that my body type can't be dressed. You know? It was very frustrating. It was like, you know, hoop earrings, red lipstick. And yes, we love some hoop earrings in New York and some red lipstick. We love that shit, and it looks good on us. But that's not all that we are. You know? And it's like, she's cute. AOC's real cute, but she is not the face of every Latina. At all. She doesn't look like us here. You know what I'm saying? And so it was upsetting. It was like you came to me and you don't see me. Like you came to me with this device and you're telling me what you think of, what you imagine, but what you're telling me is I don't see you. So I had to bring it back, and I'm like, so I don't know if you know, but I'm a Latina from New York, just so you know. And when you buy a 16, and when you buy a 16, it has to be plus, because I'm a plus size woman. So don't come in here with a regular ass 16, because I wear a plus size woman 16. And it was difficult for me to say that without having feelings, you know. They handled it very well. But yeah, that was my experience, you know. That was my experience.
It makes me think of communication.
Yes, and like the lack thereof and with that particular party, because I was very clear about all my actors, because the way I approach the work, like I said, I'm actor trained, so I think about them as individuals and how they fit, how they're coming to present the story. And like an actor's job is so difficult. We have to put aside our ego, our thoughts of ourselves to represent another person entirely. So am I asking you to be inherently vulnerable? I want you to be comfortable the whole time I'm asking you to be vulnerable, which is why I always take time to center our thoughts and to bring ourselves into the space that we are and we're creating. So when I heard this, after I had been very explicit of, you know, this is the color wheel I see for each character, and be mindful of how they present themselves, and I want them to be comfortable, to then hear that Tamika had this experience after I had been really clear, because I did not want that to happen as someone who has been there herself her entire life in her career in theater. I don't know how many times I've heard, I'm gonna have to let this out, and I'm like, don't tell me that. Just your job is to costume me. You need to tell me or make me feel some type of way because you have to let something out. So that was when I heard that, I took matters into my own hand. I won't go into specifics on what happened, but you know, we dealt with it, because that should not be an experience that anyone has, period, going forward. So yeah, that was handled. But it's a story that happens, and it happens a lot. And it's up to us to cut it off at the pass.
We have to say something, and you know, and I'm emotional now because this is the only time, you know, after I told you, we had to go on with the production, and I was trying to be a good sport, you know, and I did put it behind me, but bringing it up today kind of reminds me of how I felt, right? And this is a space where I feel comfortable saying, you know, and so I'm not a victim, you know, that happens. That's part of my story. But we also have a responsibility to ourselves. That was a teachable moment for her, whether she learned something or not. I couldn't let her walk away from that experience without her knowing that I was not okay with what she was doing. There was that, and then I also needed to be vocal about it, because that means that if it happened to me, it has happened before, or it will continue to happen. And we have a responsibility, even when we don't want to think about, you know, we want, you know, we get so tired as Black women, because I definitely identify as a Black woman, you know, so we get so tired of being the ones to speak up, being the hero, being, I gotta disrupt it, you know, that's so exhausting. But at the same time, you know, we do have a responsibility, and there are kids that are gonna come after us, your kids, you know, there are kids that are gonna come after us, other plus size women who are not okay with their body, they're gonna come after me.
You know, we are kind of at the precipice, if you will, of what's next. And so I would ask, you know, what is next to propel ourselves in our identities and in our culture, and speaking up for others so that others can see us and feel seen? Like, what is your next step? What is your next step for the next people after us?
Well, I would just hope for more knowledge through films, and just really being accepted through stories, not just on our history, but what it really means to be Afro-Latina. And just for, you know, our children's children to know who we are as well, because we forget.
Yeah, absolutely.
One word comes to mind for me specifically, and that is immersion. I got to do more research. I got to know more about who I am, about who you ladies are. There's so much meat at this table. I was like, like trying to, I couldn't even digest it all. So immersion.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would have to say that I want to implore or challenge casting people to be radically inclusive in their casting. Radically inclusive. Like, yes, the story calls for this, but unless that's gonna mess up the way that the story goes, be radically inclusive in your casting. Like, maybe that protagonista, the main chick, maybe she's, like we said, a plus size girl, and by plus size I don't mean a plus size model. You know, like Sabria Majors is beautiful, but we don't all look like Sabria Majors.
Yes.
And so get you a Tamika with a belly who don't have a whole lot of booty. That's cool. That's cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. I would, just let other folks who are in this journey of finding and defining who they are to show up as you are. Show up as authentic as you are, as your genuine self. I promise there is room for you. There is room being made for you. There are people who are working behind the scenes for you. And, you know, your struggles, our struggle, your joys are our joys. And we're working towards creating more space for you to take up. So that's always what I tell folks, or even when I'm teaching or teaching other artists and talking about racial equity and social justice, is show up as who you are. You may not be welcomed by everyone because that's a rosy colored lens view of life, and that's not the world we live in, but you'll find your people, you'll find where you belong, or make that space for yourself and for others to be there with you. Because something like I was just saying, I've been told, I don't know how often I was told to shrink myself. Your hair's too big, you're too tall, you're too thick, you're too this. And when I realized that it didn't matter, that how I showed up was how I showed up, and that's it, period, that's when I was fully comfortable with myself. And I hope that everyone else can get to a point where they're there And if you're struggling to get there, that's a part of the journey. And I promise there are people around there for you. So, you know, continue to take a space. And may that be in theater, music, art making, in whatever form you take and shape it. Just do it. You need to be seen. And if it's only seen by 10 people, those 10 people will tell other 10 people, and then will tell other people, and you will find your people.
Yeah.
So
and I will take your advice. And every time I audition, I will remind myself who I am. I mean, that's something that we all have to do. It's just like, oh yes, I am this and that, and both can show up in this space. I don't have to categorize for you. I can be all those things, and I'm gonna audition for, Stella, whoever it might be, right? Yep. Because Stella can be me, and I can be Stella.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me and with us. Thank you so much to Broadway Dallas.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much to Black Art Matters, and we hope to see you again.